Okay, good morning. My name is Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery in Santa Ana. And today's class is going to be on what we know about California natives. So we're not, there are nurseries in California that specialize in California natives, and there are some really good books out there that you can look up how to grow California natives and which ones they recommend. But we haven't found a single reference that'll tell you that overwatering is not really an issue. I mean, most of the books will tell you that, there's quite a few California natives. If you keep them wet in the summer, you'll rot them. Or even worse, they say if the drainage is not really sharp, you've got to tilt them a little bit so the water doesn't collect near the center of the plant. A lot of the succulents like this Lewisia and this Dudleya here, they say that you got to tilt them. Well, we started growing natives about 5 years ago just because we're starting to grow more and more of the plants that we sell. And when we started growing natives in our soil, which I didn't bring a sample here, which has no compost in it, we found that every native that we tried, now we haven't grown everything. We've grown, maybe 20 or 30 of the more popular California natives, and found that none of them rotted if we watered them and kept them wet year round. So the soil, the problem we have is in the trade that everybody uses soil. Not everybody, but most of the nurseries that are famous, that have well-known names, use a growing medium that's got, let's see if I can find one here for you. So most nurseries use ground up wood as the main part of their growing medium. So this is really finely ground up wood. You can see the little flakes in here. Some nurseries use coarser pieces of ground up wood. And the problem is ground up wood, it really isn't dirt. And unfortunately in our industry right now, the going thought is you can't use dirt in containers, real dirt, which is this white sandy soil, because it has no nutritional value. So the universities have promoted using rotten dead trees as soil, and on a lot of, some plants are real tolerant of that. Like this redwood here, I don't think it'll let rot in ground up wood very easily. I mean, everything can rot in ground up wood if it's bad enough. And this little rose here, we don't see roses rotting very easily in ground up wood, but there's a lot of natives that just rot in ground up wood. So that's been the main problem. And that is, now I will mention, just because they don't promote that kind of soil. So there is a nursery in Northern California by the Bay Area, Las Palitas. And they do not, I haven't been there lately, so I don't know if anything's changed. But we knew for a long time that on their website, they say, why don't nurseries grow plants in real dirt? They don't promote a heavily composty type mix as a growing medium for their plants. And they are a native plant specialist that seems to know what they're doing. And that's the only one I know of that doesn't use ground up wood in their soil mix. We've seen nurseries over the past years change their mix somewhat. So we noticed a lot of nurseries that use ground up wood, what they started doing is using bigger pieces, because bigger pieces rot slower, and they don't hold as much water. But they eventually go to the same thing. That's the problem. It's really, if you just put them in pure white sand, they should not rot. There's nothing in sand that promotes root rot. But if you put them in ground up dead trees, either the bark or the wood, that's one of the ultimate things that happens. Now, again, there are a lot of plants, native plants, that can put up with that, but most of the famous ones do not like it at all. Now, I brought in the plants that we have on hand at the moment. Now, we've carried about twice as many native plants, but this time of year, right before winter starts, we just don't have as much as we do, say, late spring. Now, this is the time of year that most native plant nurseries recommend you plant natives, and that's because if these plants are going to rot, you won't notice until next summer. So they can just tell you overwatered, and you won't, and so it's too late to bring them back next summer. So when plants' roots rot and the weather's cool, they don't need much root, so they look fine. And in fact, ground up wood decomposes slower in the wintertime, so they usually don't start rotting as quickly as they do when this ground is warmer, and they need more water too. So when native plants rot away in ground up wood, it happens in the summertime. That's when they ultimately die, because they need more roots, and they're not there, so they just shrivel up, and then they'll tell you, oh, you overwatered this summer. So anyway, we just keep native plants wet, just like all the other plants in our store, in our soil, which has no wood in it, and nothing ever seems to happen to them. So now, if you get a plant from us and it's not grown by us, and you'll know because it's got someone else's name on it, and there's ground up wood around the roots, most natives, especially the ones we have on hand, if you want to remove that when you plant it and it's cool, like right now the weather's in the 60s and it's supposed to go in the low 70s, you can just take a hose and wash it off real gently. You don't have to take it all off, but take a lot of it off, and then put them in the ground. And if it gets really hot, like upper 70s, low 80s, if you set a trash can next to this to shade it most of the day, there won't be any shock. But if the weather, and if it blows, if the wind blows, you might have to put the trash can right over it or something like that to keep the dry wind off. And it takes 2 weeks to recover from damage or, disturbed root systems. And then you get that wood out of there, and then they do a lot better. So with the natives now, there are some natives that are more, the one plant that we have the most trouble with fixing of the natives is Arctostaphylos manzanita, which we love. So we don't usually sell these unless we've changed the dirt, because if you change the soil on them, most likely it'll die. So we do lose quite a few of the manzanitas. We're finding out which ones can tolerate fixing or washing soil off the roots better than others. And generally we do this with the taller growing manzanitas, the ones that either are large bushes or small trees, because that's what most people like. We grew the ground cover ones for a while, but no one ever bought any, so we just kind of gave up on the ground cover ones. They're nice if you have a big, huge slopes, but generally they're not as appealing as the ones that have the gorgeous red bark that peels and grows into small trees. So, but these are difficult to fix. Okay, so there's Well, we'll just start going over the plants that we carry. One of the ones that we've carried for a long time that's not very sensitive to soil is a native plant called Baccharis. I need to look up the spelling on it. I haven't written this down for a while. Okay. So this is coyote bush or coyote brush, and it is used as a tall ground cover. This particular one here, it looks like it might be, doesn't say which one they put in here. Okay, that's interesting. So there were two that were real popular, Pigeon Point and one other one. But they tend to grow, a foot or two tall. And each plant can grow about so big. They are not permanent as trees and taller bushes are. You'll get maybe 5 to 10 years out of Baccharis. But it is a nice native ground cover that's very drought resistant, especially along the coast. I had one come up in my yard once by my mailbox, just on its own from seeds blowing from a ground covered area, and made a nice shrub next to my mailbox for at least 6-7 years, and then it just pooped out. So it's nothing spectacular. It pretty much just looks like a green shrub, but it doesn't have any ugly things that go on with it. You just kind of shear it once in a while. A nice green bush. Makes little tiny flowers, but nothing showy. This is monkey flower. Now there's two kinds of monkey flowers, are mimulus. And most of the ones that we sell are actually considered nativars rather than species. So what people have done is they bred different species of mimulus, and there's another one called diplocus, of the monkey flowers, to make different colors, different styles. Some grow more upright into bushes, maybe 18 inches to 2 foot tall. Some just spread on the ground, like this one's more of a spreader. The spreaders seem to live a bit longer. I haven't grown enough of these to tell you for certain. The upright ones, maybe not as long, and the ones that hang or spread make good hanging basket plants. It's interesting. You wouldn't think of a native being in a hanging basket, but I've got one in my house, been a yellow one of these. It's been hanging in a basket on the edge of my patio for 4 years. I mean, most plants don't live in hanging baskets that long. This thing's been in there quite a while. So, a little over a foot and a half, maybe, foot and a few inches. But I'm amazed that it's still alive after this long. We cut it back now and then, abuse it now and then, but it just keeps going. Now here's one I don't know too much about. Camisonia. So one of our nurseries we've been using for the last 8 years or so changed owners, and the new owner, the new guy in charge, seems to want to grow a lot more of California natives. This one is Camisonia, which is one of the natives that lives on the beaches of California. Kind of grows, spreads out on the sand dunes or just above that area, and it blooms. So it's called beach evening primrose. So it has flowers. I believe they're pink on this one, but I could be wrong. So it blooms most of the warm season with flowers. I don't know how well it does in this compost-based soil. It doesn't look bad. It looks like what primroses do, where they just get real weedy in a pot really fast. They need ground to spread out in. So it'll probably just spread out and root into the native soil at your home and be fine. And if it's like other primroses, it might be hard to get rid of once you have it. So those are some of those lower ones. Now, what is promoted is that this is Galvesia. And it is considered to be the easiest California native to grow. Although we find that if it is in compost-based soils, it can rot in the pot. So we grew this crop. This one's not one of the pretty specimens we had. Someone just bought 20 of these, so they got picked over a little bit. But generally they stay low, get up to maybe 2 by 3, 2 by 4, and they bloom most of the year. So the gentleman who bought 20 lately, I had recommended a few years ago to him for his native oak garden. And they worked out so well under, around and underneath his oaks where they got partial sun to full sun that he ordered a whole bunch. He bought in a whole bunch more to put around his oak trees. So Galvesia is, I believe, Island Snapdragon is the other name for it. So they come from the Channel Islands. Another fairly low plant would be Achilles. Now, these two aren't the native Achilles, not that I know of, yeah. So these are hybrids, but really they act like, so they may be, so Achilles is native throughout North America. So a lot of them are hybrids between species in the Midwest and the West Coast. Now these look very similar to the California natives and they act like them. One of the native ones that we've carried this year is Island Pink, which is, I don't know that you can distinguish it. And Achilles tend to be very drought resistant once they're rooted in. We had first learned about them from the Mission Viejo Company. They had a test garden in the city, and they said wherever our sprinklers break, the Achilles, also known as Yarrow, tends to grow there where the sprinklers don't work. So we learned firsthand that they were really drought resistant because they tend to grow in the dry areas. Now these are perennials that this part is permanent. The flower stalks you cut off after they're done. Now they can live in the same soil for maybe 3 years. A lot of the perennials are like Shasta daisies. They live in one spot for a few years, but unless they can travel to virgin soil, they poop out. And we notice on the Achilles, as long as they can keep moving slowly in a different direction, they stay healthy. The original area where they are kind of poops out after a few years, so they can't live in the same soil very long. So if you make a meadow of these, have a different type of plant to fill in the gaps where these have left. Okay, let's see what else here is real low. So here's a plant, another plant, I believe from the Channel Islands, Epilobium or Zauschnera. It lost its flower. Okay, it had orange flowers on it. I guess they fell out. So Epilobium, which used to be called, or still called Zauschneria too. I don't know if I can spell Zauschneria with a Z, but Epilobiums, This is one of the shorter ones. Now someone put on here Sierra Sunrise, but that one grows a couple feet tall. This is probably Everett's Choice, which stays really low. I mean, the book says a few inches, so it just covers the ground. The advantage of having this in your garden is one of the few natives that puts on its flower show at the end of summer into fall. So when most natives are going dormant from drought and not blooming, at least, this one blooms late summer into fall with bright orange flowers. Doesn't get very tall. Normally after it blooms, you trim them way back because they get a little ugly in the fall, or twiggy in the fall. So they said you can cut these back to a few inches and they'll start over again as the fall and winter rains come in. They'll start growing again, cover the same area, and then bloom again that summer. So if you want to keep them neater, you kind of cut them back a bit after they finish their bloom. This one could use a haircut. Okay, let's see what else here is short. Now, some of the Ceanothus. So Ceanothus, or California lilac, may be the most well-known. Oops. Of all the natives. Again, a lot of them have trouble with water if you buy them from someone else. I mean, they have picked up a bad name because almost everything you buy from anyone else, if you get it wet in the summer or if you get it wet much of the year, the roots rot. We have found over the years that these are very easy to disturb the roots, put them in the ground. We don't seem to lose that many of them, but we do recommend if you do that, if you don't buy it from us, we grew 3 varieties this summer, that you can disturb the roots. We usually recommend cutting them in half so there's less stress on them, and then put them in your native soil, and they'll be a lot happier without the compost around them. Now, the ones we grow, of course, you just put them in the ground and they're fine, and you can water them a lot. We haven't seen any sign of rotting on Ceanothus in wet dirt as long as the soil does not have compost. Now, this Ceanothus is Anchor Bay, which stays low, foot, maybe 2. Nice blue flowers in the spring, like all Ceanothus, but can get out there quite wide, 10 foot across, 1 to 2 foot tall. So that's a nice ground cover Ceanothus. This one's quite popular. This is Dark Star. This is a bigger one. This one, 3 foot. Now, Ceanothus you can trim. They do recommend if you trim them, trim through the younger growth. If you have an old Ceanothus and you cut through the thicker branches, you can kill that branch. So let the damage be on younger, smaller stems, and it doesn't affect the plant as badly. This one, real dark cobalt blue flowers, good show of flowers. Again, 3 to 5 foot high, 8 to 10 even more wide. So a big moundish low shrub, not too tall. I mean, if you trim it, keep it too tight, it might go upwards to 5 feet or so. But a real good show of flowers. This one I can see is loading up with flower buds right now. So that's Dark Star. Now, we're always looking for ones that stay more compact. Now, this one's supposed to be one of the smaller Ceanothus. This one's called Centennial. And it's supposed to only be 1 or 2 foot by 2 to 4 foot across or so. So a much smaller one. Doesn't take up as much room in your garden. Haven't seen this one bloom yet. Don't know it as well as the other ones. Now, among the sages, there's a lot of named sages or salvias. This is hummingbird sage. And it doesn't get real tall. There is a variety that grows a little bigger, but hummingbird sage in my yard the foliage seems to come up about a foot and a few inches. It does spread sideways and makes a little colony that spreads. So you can get, I think mine's about 6 foot across, foot and a half high. And then in the spring and early summer, it puts out these spikes of gorgeous deep pink flowers. Now, hummingbirds like most sages, but this one is named for hummingbirds. It doesn't seem to like full sun except along the coast, so part sun. Might be the best place for, or at least cool sun, so no reflected heat, not in a real hot part of the garden. Now here's a few more what are called nativers, which are either naturally occurring or sages that are crosses between the species. Like there's some of the native sages in Orange County are Leucophyllum. I believe Appiana, the white one, is the native in Orange County, but the purple sage, Leucophyllum. So these are crosses between many of the native sages. This is called bee's bliss. Now, a lot of the regular native sages, like here's black sage, and a lot of the native sages, especially the species, grow about 4 or 5 foot tall and 8 or 10 foot wide. A lot of these selections are found or bred to be shorter. So bee's bliss may only be 2 to 3 feet, and Dara's choice about the same height. They're shorter so they don't take quite as much room in your garden. Maybe this high when they're blooming, 2 to 3 foot high when they're blooming. They can bloom for long periods, spring, summer. And you see this one starting to bloom right now. And they all have that, most of the sages we sell have that backcountry smell that you smell when you hike in the hills. The native sage smell, it's pretty much unforgettable once you walk through the countryside. I haven't grown black sage before. It may not be. We just want to carry it because it's rarely seen in the trade. It may not be as pretty.
Does that one get very tall?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's a 4 to 5 footer though. Let's just look it up real quick. It actually may not be in the book.
Two of them were, but they were.
It says it's California's most common sage, but not as used as much in the garden. Just says unremarkable foliage and flowers.
Okay.
No, I mean,
And apparently it doesn't get that tall, so 3 foot by 5 foot. So it's not, but it is a real common sage in California. This is one of the white sages, or Salvia apiana. Real popular with our customers. This is a compact one that blooms at about 4 foot. The regular one, and we'll be growing that this winter and have them ready by spring. The spikes of flowers can top out at 7 or even 8 foot. So this is the compact one, which we grow a few of also, but a lot of our customers prefer the tall one with a little bit larger leaves. It's real famous for culinary use or for what do you call it? Burning the leaves, incense use. So very distinct smell on the foliage of the white sages. Now, actually, our best-selling native are the milkweeds. So this is the one that's native to Orange County, called Asclepias fascicularis, our narrow leaf milkweed. Now, they're not at their best this time of year because they usually go to sleep. So all this stuff just dries up. The purists say leave it right, leave it ugly, because a lot of the native birds use the dead stems to create a nest. They use them, they weave them together to make their nest. So it's nesting material for a lot of birds. So they do totally, all these above ground parts totally turn brown. They start from the ground every spring. March, April is when they come out of the ground. So they're missing that in the winter, come back up in the spring, get to about 2 foot, 3 foot. They're supposed to be highly invasive. So if the ground is moist, they'll keep spreading in the moist soil. And they are one of the favorite larval foods, caterpillar foods for the native monarch butterflies. There's another Asclepias we carry that has broader leaves, Asclepias speciosa. In fact, the book says there's 22 species of Asclepias in California. So there's a lot of them. We know that there's some varieties that are evergreen. In fact, we have one we think is evergreen, but we don't know what species it is, so we haven't been propagating because we don't know what to call it. And there are some native out in the deserts which are interesting because they have no leaves. They're just stems that the caterpillars eat. So anyway, native Asclepias. Here's a plant that we kind of like this one too. This is a solanum. Xanthi. This is a selection of solanum. So solanums are native throughout North and South America, or at least from this part of North America down through South America. So there's a famous one, the Solanum rantanetti, also sometimes called Lysimachia rantanetti, which has a larger purple flower, blue or purple flower. This is the one, this was found in the hills behind, up in the hills above Santa Barbara. So it is a native one, grows just a foot or two tall, foot or two wide, blooms most of the year. It's quite attractive. It can shut down a bit in the winter when it gets real cold. But a nice little colorful shrub. It can get some of the local insect. It can be infested by some local insects. spider mites occasionally. And since it is related to tomatoes and potatoes in the summertime, you might get one of those big hornworm caterpillars on it. Just be aware of that one. But that's pretty colorful, so it's also, that one's known as it's one of the nightshade families. Okay, this one we like a lot. This is a Butylon palmeri. Which is related to hibiscus, related to the flowering maples from the tropics. But this one's interesting because it's native to our deserts, to the lower Sonoran Desert. So high heat doesn't bother it. Lack of water doesn't seem to bother it much either. So even though it's related to plants that thrive on water, it's not that needy. You can take extreme heat. Now, we do recommend, if you want the best out of this, that you remove a lot of the dirt. So we did that last summer with one of these, and boy, the leaves get bigger. The leaves get a little bit more blue-gray coloring. The plants grow really fast. Our plant, now I had it in the nursery and someone bought it, the one that I had grown myself. So we're growing some more. Or you can just take the soil off of these plants and get it to thrive a little better. They can bloom gold-colored flowers about that big most of the year, spring, summer, fall. They'll grow about 3 foot tall, 5 to 8 foot across. It's a big moundy shrub. Easy to trim, keep them tidy, but a pretty nice looking plant. We like this one a lot, especially if you can get it out of the composty soil and put it in the native soil. They seem to be a lot prettier. It's supposed to be easy to grow from seed, so we're trying that too. Okay, these are some of the native irises. This one lost its tag, so I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. So a lot of the irises are either blue, purple, yellow, or white. White and purple, most common colors. They're evergreen. They don't need a lot of summer irrigation. They don't grow much taller than this. They bloom well in the spring and early summer with some beautiful flowers. So we sell bearded iris from Europe, which have a little broader leaves than these, a little bit larger flowers, but the California natives certainly can look real nice too. And like most irises, they spread slowly, make large colonies. Now this plant I like a lot. We put in the newsletter this week, Lewisia, native to Northern California. They grow fine here. Lewis and Clark found it, so Lewisia, after Lewis. Or they first wrote about them. So the foliage is a rosette. Doesn't get much taller than this and much wider, maybe 1.5 feet across. But in spring and summer and into fall, they'll put out these bouquets of flowers that are about so big. And the most common color seems to be kind of a coral orange. There's pink, there's white, there's yellow. Quite a few colors. And we have a mix of colors, but these plants are a bit young yet. We brought a few of the largest ones out. We have a lot still growing at our growing ground. So we do like Lewisias. This is one of the ones where the book says, you know, because we used to buy these from other growers and they just rot in the pots. If you water them once, they just rot away. They hate compost around their roots. So when we grow them, yeah, just keep them wet. They grow fast when they're wet. You know, Northern California, they get a lot of rain there. They can get 40 inches of rain in the winter where they're native to. It's not like they hate water. I mean, they're coming from the places where redwoods grow. So, you know, it's always moist. They just can't take the compost, so we have to grow them ourselves. But you know, when they're blooming, they're as colorful as any annual. They're really a good show of color. We love Dudleyas. This one's actually not native to California. It's native to northern Baja, which is close enough apparently. So this is Dudleya Bretonii. Love the way it looks. Just be a little careful with them. The leaves are very brittle compared to other succulents. You know, you hit this with the baseball, you're going to break off half the leaves. They do shoot up stalks of flowers. Nothing real showy, but not ugly. But we love the way they look. Dudleya Bretonii.
Is that a pointed edge on the?
They're very soft. Very soft leafed. So kind of a little bit fragile. You know, I don't know if I'd put these near a sidewalk, more on a slope or in a pot where no one's going to step on them. In nature, you know, I've walked, when I was younger, I walked some of the hills, and they seem to be always on the north slopes. Just the north slopes, I think, stay a little moister. Of course, this is from the coastline, I believe, of maybe some of the islands of Baja. So a little moisture. This is Rosa californica, the rose that grows in California naturally. So these are like short climbing plants. So you'll get a bush about 4 or 5 foot high that can spread. Most of them have rosy, you know, 6-petaled flowers that are deep pink. I would think they would bloom once a year for about 4 or 5 months. But you know, this is one that's collected from the wild. I haven't seen them, but most wild roses will bloom start of spring through about midsummer, and that's pretty much it. Now, most of the roses you see growing wild aren't near the coast. And because they're not near the coast, in Orange County, this one might be subject to mildew if it's not in an open area. You see them along the roads in the mountains, so where the air is drier. So I have a feeling that these will pick up rust and mildew near the coast, unless they're in a real open spot like, you know, your parking strip. This is one of the native grapes. This one's called desert grape, desert wild grape. And, you know, it may turn out the same as the rose. We'll have to see what happens this close to the ocean. If it's from the desert, a lot of times you bring something from the desert to the coast, they get mildew on the foliage. They can't handle the moisture in the air. So we'll have to grow these for a while and see what happens. Again, if you have it in a well open area, it helps prevent mildew. Okay, everything else here is going to be a taller plant. I'll also start with the tallest. So here's your coast redwood from Northern California. These grow fast. We've seen these do 3 foot a year. They do fine in Southern California as long as you get them, keep them on the moist, give them moisture. One of our customers had to pull out some 80 footers because they were disturbing her neighbor's fence line. But they had been there for probably 20, 25 years and they had reached 80 foot. So they can get full size throughout the state of California, especially near the coast, and they do it quick. If you don't water them enough, you get all these brown leaves, so they're not drought tolerant at all. I mean, where they're coming from is misty coastal climate along the coast. Central and Northern California is where they're native to.
Gary, can you keep that top stalk, or if you cut it, do you tilt the plant?
They're used as hedges.
Okay.
So we've seen the coastal redwood, or these sequoias used as hedging material too. Where they just they said they're in Palo Alto, they're often used as a 20-foot high hedge because they don't get that broad at that height.
When they get that tall, how big is the root system?
Well, most trees, the roots are 3 times wider than the tree is tall, or more. So they're out there. I mean, I cut down a 20-year-old tree once. I cut it down. The roots were 100 foot long, and the tree was about 30 foot. It wasn't a redwood. I mean, this was just a regular old maple tree, silver maple in my front yard. Getting to my sewer pipe, so we cut it down, and the roots on it were, I followed them to my back door of my house from the front yard. So now here's the giant redwood, Sequoia dendron. They're not super close related to Sequoia, so they had to change the name a bit. These can grow fast too now. This one seems to need they like a cooler winter, but we've been growing for about 3 or 4 years, and 2 years ago we had a fairly cool winter, and the tree grew about 4 feet in 1 year. So, and they're beautiful trees. I think they're prettier than the coast redwoods. They get now this is juvenile foliage, so it's kind of spiny. But as they get older, it gets more scaly, like the thuyas and some of the other beautiful conifers. When we carried them 30 years ago, we'd lose them every summer, but that's because we got them from another grower. When we changed the soil on the ones we grew a couple of years ago, they made it through some heat waves without any problems. So we don't think it's the heat that causes trouble with these, just the soil mix, because that grower was using 100% organic. Now this is a version of the Monterey Cypress, Cupressus macrocarpa. This one's called Gold Crest, so it's much more yellow foliage than the original one, and it stays a little shorter, which is nice in your garden, so it's a nice standout. So the Monterey Cypresses grow quickly. This one, again, is a little bit slower version of it. The main thing you have to watch out for with Monterey Cypress is if they're drought stressed, they can catch a disease. It's a canker disease. If they're well watered, they're fine. We noticed that a lot of the Monterey cypresses back in the 80s and 90s were dying, and a lot of cypresses in general were dying at that time. Leland cypresses from Ireland were dying, and they all said, okay, it's a disease, a canker disease that cuts off the circulation. It attacks trees under drought stress and cuts off their circulation. So the ones that didn't get it were ones planted in the lawns, where people kept the moisture. So be careful with that on the Monterey cypress. As long as you water it adequately, it'll stay healthy. But if we have another one of those 5-year droughts, you may lose it. Now, this is one of the few natives for Orange County. This is Tecate Cypress, which is native to some of the canyons near the inland edge of Orange County. They keep changing the names on these, so this is now Hesperocyparis. Forbesii. So Tecate Cypress. Of course, being a native, you won't have to water much. A true native to Orange County, and conifers in general are fairly drought tolerant. They say it's a moderate to fast grower to maybe 20 to 30 foot. It's how big they are in the canyons back there. Pretty much young trees are, and young cypresses also, generally more broad teardrop shape. And the conifers don't seem to be as sensitive to having the compost on the roots. If you want it to grow faster, take some of it off. We've never seen the coast redwoods die from being in compost, but the giant sequoias, we would recommend removing it. They seem to be more sensitive. Okay, of course, another one native to Orange County, another tree native to Orange County would be your oaks. So this is coast live oak. Quercus agrifolia. It's getting more difficult to find perfectly genetically true coast live oak, and this one does not look perfect. The leaves look a little different to me. This is supposed to be another one. This one looks a little bit more like the coast live oak, a little more spiny edge. This one may be a hybrid. So the problem we're having with the coast live oak sources is that it's hard to find seeds that aren't hybridized, because there's so many oaks growing in Orange County. I mean, you know, down this street we have the cork oaks from Europe, and then I know in South County they use Quercus ilex from Europe. I believe that one's from Europe too. The holly oaks. So the cities are planting all these different oak trees, and everybody's planting all these different oak trees. So it's messing, and because they're pollinated by wind, the pollen gets mixed up, and it's hard to find true seeds that come out live oak. So this one looks like it might be a mixture of oaks. Not that they're defective or anything like that, but if you want a true live oak, you have to find the seeds in deep in a coast live oak forest. Now this is an interesting one. If you've traveled and visited along the Central California coastline, this is Quercus berberidifolia. Something like that. It's got a barberry-like leaf, so it's a little bit more sharp. But these are the miniature oaks that make the miniature forests along near Monterey, say. So you walk into those forests, and these trees are only about as tall as this room, maybe 8 foot. A lot of them are just like this when you walk by them. And then in the oldest parts of the little forest, they may be 8 to 10 foot. Beautiful trunks, mottled bark trunks, beautiful little trees that just make a miniature oak forest. So rather than getting 40, 50 foot like the larger oaks, these guys are also known as scrub oaks, but they're just miniature oaks. So if you wanted an oak tree in a pot, or one that never gets too big, that would be this type. Very similar looking to the coast live oak, except it's just a lot slower and a lot smaller growing. So this one's probably about 6 years old. We got it when it was about this tall. I only have one at the store right now. If you're ever interested in these, I've got a few more that are growing ground about the same height. Okay. Now, we have a few trees that are not native to Orange County. This is the Western Redbud, which is native to California, but not in Orange County. But it's used a lot. It is California native. Let me write down the name on it. It's a Western Redbud. And generally they grow a nice vase shape. You often see them around 8 foot to about 15 foot tall. Deciduous trees, so they're going bare. They have kind of a blue-green leaf. But what happens around March, these things just light up like neon sticks. So they have clusters of really small pink flowers that line all the stems. So in March, for about a month, the tree looks like a neon stick of glowing pink. And then in April, the new growth comes out. It's kind of a blue-green butterfly-shaped leaf, which is quite attractive. You can see how short this is. We got it, earlier this year when it was even smaller. So they grow pretty fast in the ground. We notice that our growing ground, if they root in through the bottom of the pot into the dirt, betas take off and get going. They'll put on 5 foot in a year. So, but again, they're not huge trees. They're not real long lived. 20, 30 years is supposed to be about the lifespans for redbuds, which also means they won't get too big and knock things over in your garden. So they're a short-lived tree. About the same as birches and ornamental plums and things like that never get that big. So a nice native there. And then this is desert willow, which is Chalopsis. This is a selection called Bubba. Bubba was found in San Antonio, Texas. So these are native from Southern California, in the desert areas, all the way east to western Texas. And they grow 10 to maybe 20 foot tall, somewhere in that range. They're deciduous, so this is dropping its leaves. It'll be bare until about April. And then they wake up. What they do is they grow about now these are related to trumpet vines, the trumpet vine family, which includes tacomas, the yellow bells, jacaranda, which is a famous purple flowered tree, and the trumpet vines. So these make very beautiful clusters. So clusters about so big at the end of each branch of a kind of a violet, a blend of violet and soft pink, a little bit of yellow, violet, some beautiful flowers. And what they tend to do for us is they'll grow about 6 to 8 inches, stop, bloom. And when that bloom's over, they'll grow another 6 to 8 inches, stop, bloom. So the tree has a light bloom on it from, say, May through into November. So there seems to be color on it throughout that time. Now, the reason we like Bubba is because it's not very self-fertile. So most of the desert willows that are self-fertile, or if you have more than one desert willow close by, then they start making their seed pods, which slows them down a bit. The seed pods are, even though they're not ugly, they're like shoelaces that hang on the tree. Quite long shoelaces, so the tree will stop growing, stop blooming while it makes these seed pods. So in order to get to grow and bloom some more, you got to cut them off. Bubba, if you have a Bubba tree by itself, we just don't see it making seed pods. So it seems to be self-sterile, at least when they're young. It may, because I used to grow pink trumpet trees, which are closely related, native to South America. And for the first 10 years, it didn't make any seed pods. And then after that, it started making them. So it's possible when these are young, they just don't bother. They don't have enough energy to make seed pods. But the literature does note that they make fewer seed pods than most of the desert willows. So it's less mess, more blooms because of that. But a nice kind of semi-open willowy tree to 15 to maybe 25 foot. Not a huge tree. Now here's a tree we had in our email newsletter a few weeks ago. This is Cercocarpus Traskii. That spelling. This is one of the rarest trees in California. They said there's only half a dozen of the original ones on Catalina Island. I believe it was Catalina Island left. Yeah, Catalina Island mountain mahogany. So it is a project that there's people and there's a group in Catalina Island that's propagating these. And apparently this grower got a hold of some of their seedlings and potted them up. Unfortunately, it's in compost soil. We noticed when we took them out that there's hardly any root on these. So if you wanted to grow one of these, these are trees native to Catalina. Not bad looking trees, evergreen. They grow maybe 20 foot. I think some of the biggest ones on the island are 30 foot. but they're real old at that point. So they do say about 20 foot or so. They have interesting. Yeah, they have interesting little seed pods that look like little feathers. So now there's a native California. There's another one native to mainland California that's not endangered. It looks very similar. I don't know if it's. So I don't know if this one has any special value. You know, if they lost them all on Catalina, the other ones that are closely related look very similar. The other one is Cercocarpus betuloides. This one's Cercocarpus traskii. So it's kind of a project to grow these, just because there's so few of them around. So not a bad looking little tree, not exciting, but interesting. Totally forgot about that. This is Toyon. So this is what gave Hollywood its name. This is holly-like foliage, native plant that blooms in the summer and then has red berries in the fall and winter. So it looks kind of like a holly, even though it's not related. They tend to grow about 8 to 12 foot or so, and they can spread out wider than that. So big background screen, or fairly large bush. We got these last summer when they're about 2 inches tall, so they're growing at a decent rate. I'd expect this to grow about 2 to 3 feet this coming year. It's kind of a sprawling big shrub on its own, that is. You can tidy it up. Now this is one I haven't yet to succeed with. That's why we're mentioning it late here. Fremontodendron. Now this is the Southern California, Northern Mexico species, Mexicanum, which is supposed to be easier to grow than the ones from Central and Northern California. It's also known as Flannel Bush. And they're noted in this for their spring bloom. So they get these large golden flowers that just cover the plant in the spring, and these can grow 10, 20 foot, upright shrubs, beautiful plants. I haven't succeeded, but I haven't tried for about 10 years, so I've got to try it again, clean up the roots, see if I can get it to thrive. They grow these in England, the ones native to California. But it's probably just a soil issue again. I haven't tried it for a while. Okay, here's one I missed. So very common plant tree in more of the desert areas. This is mesquite. Prosopis pubescens. So mesquite trees, and this is the native one. We've carried the Chilean mesquite in the past, which is a beautiful evergreen, thornless variety that grows too fast for its own. We kind of gave up selling them because it grows so big so quickly that its root system doesn't ever seem to support the top of the tree. The wind, it catches wind so well, and they have the same problem they said in Arizona. A lot of the mesquite trees that are being planted, they're like big parachutes, and the winds come up in the desert and just blows them out of the ground. We had one in the nursery, a Chilean mesquite, beautiful tree, beautiful, real fine textured foliage. Every winter and fall, the wind would just pull it up. It doesn't seem to root in well enough, so they say in Arizona, the recommendation is never water them, never fertilize them. You got to slow them down. Now, this is one of the smaller mesquites native to California, so it shouldn't, hopefully not have that problem. It says 10 foot to 30 foot is the range. So if you keep it small, then it shouldn't cause that problem. Now, the interesting thing about mesquites, very drought tolerant. This one is deciduous, so it should drop its leaves if it gets any cooler. They don't need any fertilizer. They're one of those legumes that seems to make their own nitrogen. So kind of an umbrella shape. Unfortunately, it's spiny, but if you get a trunk on it, the trunk should not be spiny. It does have attractive little flowers, fuzzy flowers that hang down in streamers on it. And then the seed pods are what makes it interesting. So this is screw bean mesquite. So the seed pod on the Chilean mesquites look like this. Not quite that big, but like, say, a popsicle stick. And mesquite trees, the pods are edible. They have seeds inside which you don't eat, but the pods themselves they're kind of like beef jerky, firm, chewable, very sugary. So the pods themselves were ground up and used as flour, or just the children would just eat the pod, spit out the seeds. So our Chilean mesquite, yeah, it was nice to go up to the tree, pull off a pod, and start chewing on it. Very sweet. The screw bean mesquite, the pod is tightly wound up. So it's very interesting. I can't draw what it looks like. It's a very interesting pod that hangs off of these. You can still eat them, but they're shaped a different way, which they said makes it a little harder for birds to get at the seeds.
You're talking about how big it gets on the top and no base to, would it help to
No, cut them back.
trim
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
from blowing over?
Yeah, so this one's not as fast. I mean, our Chilean mesquite would grow 10, 12 foot a year. It was just too fast. This one is apparently a slower, smaller trees. And because they're native to our desert areas, they're native to the very eastern part of Orange County, right along the border with Riverside County or San Bernardino County. So, but yeah, it's a plant that once you get it in the ground, maybe water it once and then don't water it again.
Until it rains.
Yeah, the rain will take care of it. And we do recommend you get it out of the compost soil. Mesquites do have a problem with compost, it seems. Okay, any questions? I think I covered everything I have in stock right at the moment. So in the spring, we usually grow Matella hot poppies, which are also very, very popular with the big 10-inch wide, 8 to 10-inch wide flowers. And I don't recall what else we carry in Californias, but there's quite a few. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.